Yep, here we are. Tamler, nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too. Thanks
And I
for
really,
inviting me.
yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to talk about a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Maybe a little bit about yourself first, if that's okay. Um, I know that you seem to be a very interesting guy. You've done a bit of
Thank you.
writing, you've done a lot of podcasting, you've done teaching, academic work. Um, Film study, or at least film appreciation slash
Yeah.
analysis. I think you've done like maybe a couple different podcasts, but I know you have one called Very Bad Wizards. How would you describe that if you had to sort of sum it up in a few seconds?
So this was a podcast that we started in the first episode came out in 2012, I believe. Or is it 2012 or 2011? One of those two. And it's with David Pizarro, who's a psychologist at Cornell University. I'm a philosophy professor at the University of Houston. And I was very big into podcasts back then. I don't know if you
Hmm.
were but by the time it was like 2010, 2011, I was already hooked on them. Yeah,
Okay.
at a time when a lot of people didn't know what they were.
Yeah.
And my favorite thing about them was you have something that you love, say sports or film, and you have people talking about them in this informal way where they can swear, they can say what they really think, and they can be
Yeah.
themselves. They're not on ESPN or on some, film comment panel or something like that.
Yeah.
They're being themselves and making inappropriate jokes. And so I thought, what if you did that with philosophy and psychology, moral psychology? And
Hmm.
so, and I this David Pizarro, who's my co-host, we had met a few times at conferences because he does moral psychology stuff too, as did I. And I just thought this guy would be perfect. And so I pitched it to him. We thought we were just doing 6 episodes at first, and then it just kept going. And it's been great. Like, it's changed so much over the years. It used to be really almost exclusively about philosophical and or psychology topics, and now we just did one on Old Boy. We do
Yeah.
a whole series on Borges episodes, the brothers Karamazov. We do so many movies. It's just become kind of what we're excited about and what we're enthusiastic about, and listeners just have and just their ideas, and it's this
Hmm.
whole community. It's been among the biggest prides and joys of my professional life, for
That's
sure.
awesome. That's
Yeah.
awesome. So you must feel very highly about your partner. What are a
What do you
couple
mean?
well, for having this experience that you've shared for so long,
Oh, sure. Yeah.
and for
He's
being so proud, of what you guys did.
By
What
now he's a great friend, but
Yeah.
we weren't. Like, that was the weird thing going into this, is we went into it kind of blind.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's a lot like a marriage. As I think a lot of people joke when they're in a podcast relationship. There are fights, there are things,
Yeah,
but yeah, it's been great.
that's cool. And is he also a Twin Peaks fan or a David Lynch fan?
No, in fact, for our Patreon, if ever I talk about a David Lynch work, this is a touchy subject with us, actually. I do
Hmm.
it with these other two people who are big Twin Peaks nerds and David Lynch nerds like I am. And so we've done these deep dives on The Return after it came out, and then also on at least 5 of his movies.
Oh, okay.
Most recently Inland Empire,
Oh,
which was
cool.
fun to dive into. I don't know if you've like given that a lot of attention, have you?
Yeah. Yes, I've seen it a couple times. I've tried to put a couple thoughts together. I've
Yeah.
explored a couple, I've explored a couple interpretations. One of my favorite being from a guy named Cornpone Flicks. He's like a video
Mm.
essayist guy. He's really cool.
I think that sounds familiar, so I think I
Yeah,
came
his
across it.
his
Yeah.
stuff is good. And um I saw it in the theater last year, so that was very cool.
Me too. Yeah.
I think it was like the first Criterion collection disc that I got, because I'm not really like big into collecting stuff.
Mhm.
But so I saw the behind the scenes stuff and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that movie's wild. I did not know that you did that much work, because I thought I knew you did an episode on Mulholland Drive,
Mhm.
and then I knew you've talked elsewhere about Firewalk with me, but I didn't really know that you've spilled
Yeah.
so many you've spilled so many words on this stuff. That's cool. I
On
have
our
to check it out.
Patreon, yeah, there's like a couple 3-hour episodes. Yeah, it's with a philosopher and a psychologist, actually, Jesse Graham, both at University of Utah, and Natalia Washington. And yeah, we did Blue Velvet, we've done Lost Highway, we've done two long episodes on The Return, and then yeah,
Oh,
Inland
wow.
Empire.
All
Yeah.
right, cool, man.
Yeah. So I have some bona fides, or at
Yeah,
least
yeah.
not like you, but I've been thinking and talking about this stuff for a long time. I love it. It
Yeah.
just it was fun just looking, just in the minor bit of preparation I did for this, just diving
Mhm.
back into the blogs and the
Oh, okay.
theories and the it's been like probably 6 or 8 months since I've gone that, it's so you can just get lost in it, and it's the best feeling. You don't feel like you're wasting time. You feel like you're learning about life and yourself and reality. So I love it.
That's interesting, because I do agree, and I'm getting a sign that my internet connection is a little iffy because I'm in the middle of a rainstorm, but
Yeah,
it's okay on your end, right?
I think so. You did a
Okay.
little glitch,
All
but
right.
like more like like a Lynchian
Like I
glitch.
was gonna say,
Yeah.
appropriate. Um, so you did a little bit of prep for today?
Just to get myself in the mindset,
Mm.
like of talking about this stuff. And it was like, that site 25 years later.
Yeah, yeah.
I haven't been there in a while, and it's
Okay.
always fun to to dive back in there. I watched a couple of your things, just not all of them, but a
Yeah.
lot of them. And yeah, I've been, I mean, I don't know if we're gonna get like later when we
Mhm.
get into like where are we right now with the return. Um, I've been, just as a little preview, interested in the idea of Twin Peaks as fundamentally Laura Palmer's dream.
Mhm.
And so looked a little bit into that just to see where the discourse is on it's all Laura Palmer's dream. And there's a lot of interesting stuff there, as I'm sure you've come across some of that.
Yeah. Well, I don't have any particular like fixed structure for how we're going to proceed. So if you don't mind, you want to just jump into that?
I mean, you want to jump into that right now? I there's
Or we have to build up to the return, because that's fair enough.
no. I wish I had a little more to say about it at the outset, but I, at the end of the return, you definitely got the sense that there's deep parallels between this and Mulholland Drive and Lost
Mm.
Highway, that something was being arrived at, and some truth is being arrived at that a character has to face,
Mm.
that haven't they haven't been willing to face, that
Mm.
it's been buried too deep in their unconscious. And the first, given how central Cooper is to the return, I think a lot of people have thought, if you're going to go that route, like Tim Crater,
Mhm.
and to a lesser extent, I actually want to talk to you about John Thorne's view, but like they really find it to be about Cooper, but it's always made sense to me that this is Laura Palmer's dream, at least from Lynch's point of view. And um you know I, I'm not big into theorizing and trying to make everything fit. I think there's a lot of stuff that it's hard to figure out, like what's Dougie in Laura Palmer's dream.
Mm.
Like I don't have a fleshed out view on what Dougie represents, But ultimately, this has been about Laura Palmer. And then once, you find out that she's living in Odessa under a new name, or a different name, you start to wonder, like this is starting to look a lot like Mulholland Drive, Lost Highway. A person kind of assumes a new identity, represses something horrible about their past, and it keeps trying, and the dream keeps trying to wake them up and doesn't,
Mm.
over and over again until maybe it does at the end. But yeah. Yeah, well, I do kind of want to like ease into it a little bit
Yeah,
more, but
yeah,
that's one of the things that I dived into. And there's this guy, I don't know if you know this guy. I think it's called FindLaura. It was like a Reddit site. This was when, this reminded me of the old days, just going into Reddit and just getting lost in Reddit. But do you know this guy, Leo something?
yeah. His name was Lu Ming. I believe he
Yeah,
passed
Lu
on,
Ming. Yeah,
and
right. And he died, right, of
yeah,
cancer
and,
before getting to complete like his master work.
and that's a good word for it. And I do believe he has, some of his closer colleagues are sort of taking up the mantle, and
Good.
there are a few people in that community that kind of like know his project inside and out, and but probably feel that it's their project as well, or at least now it is. And that's pretty cool. I have not done the whole big Find Laura dive, and but I do have a couple, I do know a couple of like his like tentpole points to it, and it's really fascinating stuff. So I
It's,
assume you went in there for a while, and
I
then
went in there for a while. I didn't read
yeah.
even close to all of it
Yeah,
because it's just amazing how much people write about this stuff,
yeah,
and it's long, it's detailed, but it's always fascinating. Even if I think of certain things are a stretch, I'm like, that's still so cool, so, there's so many people like that.
yeah.
Um,
It activates something inside of us,
mhm.
and it gets you brainstorming. You get your creative juices going.
Talking to other people,
It makes
bouncing
people want to
things.
create. I'm
Yep.
not really like a creative type, but somehow I found myself doing this, which is,
Right.
it's a
Yeah.
form of creativity. And
How did you get into this? I heard actually on the thing I watched with you
yeah,
today that you didn't even watch it till 2020.
correct. Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing
Yeah, it was like
for a
September or
Twin
something.
Peaks
I
like
didn't see any
luminary
episodes.
like you.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm no luminary. I just have a million questions, and I'm not
Yeah.
afraid to ask them. So, and
That's great.
and I know I've met quite a few cool people who enjoy trying to answer them. Um, but if you were to put me on the spot, which some people have done,
Yeah.
I either get panicky or I have very little to say, or something comes out of my mouth that I've never thought before.
Right.
I don't have anything really structured, put together, ready to go. I have enthusiasm, and honestly, it's just it really taps into that creative like vein,
Hmm.
it get if you're a certain personality type, it's not for everybody, but if you are, it gets you hooked. There's something like hypnotic about it. There's something very persuasive as far as what these like texts are doing or what these directors are doing.
Yeah.
It's mystery upon
It's
mystery.
yeah.
And
That's the key.
they're the type of mysteries that lend themselves to like multiple plausible explanations that can maybe like be contradictory but still hang on their own.
That's right.
And even like you were saying with maybe you can't find a place for Dougie in the way you're thinking about the show.
Mhm.
You don't have to abandon that line of thought, because there's so much stuff. And
And
maybe later somebody else will slot in a place for Dougie for you. And
exactly.
it makes you want to talk to people, and or talk to yourself, because I think a lot of Twin Peaks fans are mostly talking to themselves because I don't
They
know,
don't have people to
they don't
talk
have
to.
people to talk to.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I heard that you do
I
at
do.
home and also elsewhere, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So I watched it with my wife and daughter. My daughter was, I think, 13 at the time. Um, 13? Yeah, 13. She had just turned 13 when it premiered.
And
And
just to interject, I have a 10 and a 13-year-old daughter.
okay,
Yeah, they're
that's
both about
it's
to hit
time.
their next age. So, and they know about the show and they know the music and they know some catchphrases and whatnot, but I don't know when I should they'd have to be willing to watch it. I don't know what would be too early. So that's one of the things I'm curious to hear from you.
I think, well, so 13 is was great with my daughter, but she was an only child. I've raised her on watching
Okay.
movies and like that are like entirely inappropriate for what age she is.
Yeah.
She has seen, like, she saw Chinatown probably when she was 11, like just not okay stuff. But like she was ready is the way, but I it was so fun watching with her because she really loved the original series. And then I didn't show her. She was young enough that I didn't quite show her Fire Walk with Me
Yeah.
until after the return. And it's
Okay.
just, or not even after the return, it was during the return. And it's like, it's
Mhm.
clear you have to see this, like,
Okay.
to understand what's going
Yeah.
on. So let's just watch it. And it's great. And there was no reason for me to not. It's just so, viscerally shocking. Even if you already know that that's the case, as you
Mm.
do from watching the series. Um, but yeah, and then it was so nice. My wife likes it, but for her, it's not something to obsess about. For my daughter and I, it was something to obsess about and
Yeah.
talk about. And this was, so I live in Houston. By the time it's getting to like episode 16, we're
Mm.
right before Hurricane Harvey. So then when Hurricane Harvey hit, um, it was like all we had was that show, essentially. We got power back, a couple days afterwards, but there's
Mhm.
nothing like, Houston is in ruins. We're volunteering, going to like places, but really what we want to do is come back to the house and just keep rewatching the show. And we rewatched it a bunch of times. We were obsessed with it, like, and she has her ideas about things. She hates the Laura, it's Laura's dream
Okay.
theory. She's not a fan of that, but also doesn't have a real. She has little snippets of things which I think are very compelling and
Mhm.
compatible with all sorts of different ultimate interpretations, but and even came on my podcast
Oh, how
and
cool.
gave a little like we did it after the break because she couldn't be on with my co-host because he hadn't seen it. Um, yeah, she gave her analysis of Cooper at the end of episode 18 and his kind of stump, like how he slumps a little bit.
Mm.
He just kind of goes down as he realizes like he doesn't know what's going on. And she noticed that Audrey in episode 16 does the same thing in the Roadhouse. Like when she realizes, holy shit,
Mm.
like, there's something's off here. And like they both have that little hunched look of like they just got like 20 years older in like uh 10 seconds or 30 seconds or something like that. And it was part of her theory about how people go through and her idea was that Audrey got closer than Cooper did, but people go through these cycles. And when the kind of the delusion is comes to light somehow, that what they think is going on isn't, how they react to that
Mm.
um is kind of the key to interpreting how far they are along their path.
Is it a path with a like with an endpoint? Is there like a place to get to a victory of sorts or?
So what do you think of this? To me, the like, if you want to look at a case where somebody got to their endpoint successfully, it's Nadine, right? She had this, like for a long time, she was lying to herself about Ed, and she was keeping him from his true love. And then, thanks to Dr. Jacoby, is kind of enlightened about what she did. And,
Mhm.
that's a really hard, like, imagine being Nadine and thinking, I just took a guy who was
Hmm.
in love with his high school sweetheart and forced him to stay with me all these years. And all these years he could have been with the person that he really loved. Like, normally you would just keep that down. You would keep lying to yourself. No, that's not what he really wanted, or no, it's not my fault. But in that scene with Big Ed, she just tells him, like, I've been really selfish and I've kept you. And I release you and go. And I'm so happy that at least now you get to go. Like, that seems like a majorly successful journey that she had, that culminates in them being happy. And that Nadine is happy for them. So she feels like she truly awoke in a productive way. Audrey seems somewhere, I don't know. I have no idea what you think. Like, what do you think? What do you think? What do you want to say about Audrey? But I think something happens when she wakes up. She's jogged out of something there, but it's probably not quite complete. And then with Cooper, you get the sense, yeah, uh he still has a long way to go. I don't
Hmm.
know. Yeah. What what
Yeah,
what
that's interesting.
yeah.
Well, let me just ask you a little follow up on Nadine.
Hmm.
Um, she's had a series of bizarre behaviors throughout the show. And
Hmm.
do you attribute some or most or all of those to this sort of like stuff that she wasn't able to wake up to, or like stuff that she's repressing? Or I don't know, do you think there's a connection between the bizarre behaviors and then the her like closing behavior at the end of her arc, for lack of a better word?
So do you mean like her, like when she had superpowers and stuff like that? Is that what you're referring to with her strange behavior and
Yeah, her superpowers, her
going out with Mike?
yeah, stuff like that. Some of her obsessive, like compulsive quirks. I would say just like a lot of her mannerisms in general.
Yeah, the mannerisms for sure. Um, I don't know. This relates to a kind of meta question, which is how much you attribute the like a large part of season two to Lynch, and even Lynch and Frost at that point, but certainly to Lynch, given how much control he had over the return. And sometimes I think like some of those things, and I think the subplot with Nadine might be one of them, where I don't really think, like, I'm not even sure if Lynch knew that much about them. Never mind is incorporating them into his final vision, not to minimize Mark Frost's contribution, because I'm guilty of that often, but I don't
Hmm.
think it's right. Um, but in terms of the mannerisms, and in terms maybe even her eye patch, and maybe like, yeah, maybe, like Lynch always has these kinds of obvious things where characters can't see
Hmm.
something about themselves. Like the eye patch could be just a some kind of representation of that. And yeah, her mannerisms, I just think that's just the toughest thing to face about yourself, that you kept a man that you loved from living the life that he wanted to live most deeply for like 26 years. Like it's really impressive that she was able to admit that to herself and liberate him. And so I feel like that's the kind of thing that the characters are working towards. And,
Interesting.
some of them get there and some of them don't. but I don't know if anybody does to the extent that Nadine does.
Yeah, I know she's been called like one of the few heroes or sort of fully realized characters in the show. That which I would agree with, unless she got a new boyfriend now.
With
Now it's
Jacoby.
cool. Yeah.
That's good too, because she,
Yeah.
let them.
Yeah, well, nothing wrong with that, but that would be the only damper on the like on like Nadine as like hero or
You mean if she's just doing it to get with
yeah,
Jacoby?
she's got something better came along and but I don't know. But it's interesting that
The Joe Rogan.
they both have the interesting eyewear, because he's got
Yeah, that's
the
right. Oh, yeah.
purple glasses, and so there's probably something happening there. I wonder to what extent her like super strength stuff, which I don't really feel like getting into that, but I wonder to what extent that's like a metaphor for something, or
Yeah.
to what extent we're supposed to take it somewhat as is. I wrestled in high school, by the way, so the wrestling footage is pretty funny to me, seeing her throwing people around,
You
um,
know,
or
I have to
or
admit, like, I haven't
bringing
even
stuff.
seen a lot of that second half of season 2, except for the finale, since, and like I didn't even rewatch it with Eliza. My feeling was it went off the rails after you find out that Leland's the killer and he's caught.
Yeah.
And we kind of skipped to the finale. So I haven't even really seen some of that stuff. There's residues of it in the finale, but
Mhm.
so yeah, I'm not an authority on that stuff at
Yeah,
all.
a lot of it is, you know, only semi-memorable to me as well. Who killed Laura Palmer? Now that you brought that other guy's name up, because I think
So,
there does the return like complicate this at all, or not really?
well, I mean, if it's Laura's dream person, you think nobody, right? You
Mm.
think Leland is telling the truth when he says, I didn't kill anybody.
Mm.
And you think she actually just ran away that night and, is that Twin Peaks is her imagination of her. And this is the thing that I don't like about this theory. And I get why probably a lot of people don't like any dream. It's this person's dream or that is that, her death at the end of Fire Walk with Me somehow seems cathartic and not good, but like heroic. Um, and if you take that away from her, that's tough. But I guess the idea is that, well, that's her hero story, but in the end, she ran away. And now she's imagining what happened if I died. And actually, the people in the town care deeply about me instead of just let this happen.
Mm.
Like Sarah Palmer just let it happen under her own roof. And then the whole town, like it was clear from Firewalk with Me, I think, and that people knew about this at one level and they just didn't do anything or admit it to themselves even that they knew about it. And so, this is, I think, the thing that drew me to it's Laura's dream thing. Like, imagine a town after you die
Mm.
that's so devastated that the town completely unravels by your death and everyone is, and then this uh, FBI agent out of a dream comes in to try to track down your killer. And then, like it's the kind, and then you think of the reality, which is probably that no, they didn't do anything. Like these people didn't, they knew it was happening on some level and they didn't stop it. And, of course, the center of that is Sarah Palmer, but um, it just seems like that might be something that she would love to think, even if the reality is might be more like Deer Meadow and what's her name in Deer Meadow? I'm blanking on her
Yeah,
name.
Teresa Banks.
Teresa Banks, right?
Mm,
Even if it was a little more like that than it was like the Laura Palmer memories of Twin Peaks. It's like, yeah, I remember her. Yeah, there's something about
yeah,
her arm, you know.
that's I think that's super interesting. Um, so are, are you thinking, at least currently, that like all the abuse stuff was happening, um, uh, the extent to which she faced it head on was maybe undetermined. Um, the the Bob character was a figment of her imagination or dream or like coping strategy. Um, the homecoming queen picture was probably not in that glass case, or
Ooh, that's tough to say that, but maybe, yeah.
and
I mean, the Bob thing, I think, under any interpretation is right. You know, she projected Bob as this, um, this entity to cope with the fact that something like horrible was happening inside her house. And it made it easier to think it was coming from outside rather than within.
mm,
But,
horrible, horribly evil. So I mean, to have like the embodiment or some sort of embodiment of like dirtbag evil is
right.
yeah,
Like,
it's pretty good representation of that.
yeah,
Um,
and he's such a good representation that it's a caricature of evil in
mm,
some ways. And I don't know, one of the truest things, like if Alora's dream theory couldn't keep that the moment where she recognizes that it's actually Leland and Fire Walk with Me, to me is real. If anything's real, that's real. Like,
mm,
oh my God, this is this thing that I've been thinking and coping with is is a lie, you know? And she realizes that. That's such a trigger for everything that happens in that movie. And I think everything that happens with her, it's like when she realizes that she, as already traumatized as she is, it hits a different plane when she realizes that. And so uh, I think like that's definitely still there, no matter what. That Bob was and I know some people think Bob is real, but that's never struck me. Whatever interpretation I'm currently
I see.
exploring,
Has that
rich
not?
interpretation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that that's interesting. I've gone back and forth on the Bob thing. I've mostly been confused, but um, I think my stronger sense was probably closer to what you were saying. But to what extent is your I guess not being struck by that? Is that like just can't grasp the fact, it can't grasp the possibility of like a supernatural entity like intermingling with like people like us? Is part of the rejection just that, or is it more I don't know, from a different realm? Uh are you like
Yeah.
are you like a logical person where
No.
that kind of stuff just is not going to fly? Because and I know I keep asking questions, but this show, one of the things this show did for me is it opened up thinking about some of the weird stuff, like some of like the
Yeah.
interdimensional stuff that I would never think about in the past. And I'm not drawn toward any of it, but it's fun to think about. And I previously would like never have thought of it or never allowed myself to. So is part of it a rejection of like Bob is real? Is part of it just that it's illogical?
No. Definitely not, because I think any dream interpretation is also not going to be logical in that sense. Although I guess it could be if you did it in a kind of I don't know. Um, there are dream narratives that do, even Mulholland Drive
Mm.
matches up more easily than any dream narrative or a dream interpretation would to the return in Twin Peaks. But I think It's a good question, and I do have to examine myself because I think what it is I'm not a big science fiction person.
Mhm.
And I'm not a huge fantasy genre person, but definitely not. So the thing I really reject in the same way that my daughter kind of rejects full on dream
Mhm.
interpretations just aesthetically, like I don't want that,
Yeah.
is that Cooper really went back in time and really took, like those kinds of things. And I don't like, and the fireman is Vishnu. And like, I don't even like that kind of stuff, but not because it's not logical. It's just too clean almost. It's like some of those are like they're too they like everything matches up too perfectly. It's like that Twin Perfect. I don't know if you
Yeah.
watched all of that thing, but it's just like you get the it's like it feels like that's not what at least Lynch is about. And I don't think what Mark Frost is about either, that he's going to match television and television violence to this particular character. And like I
Yeah.
just don't think Lynch sees the world that way. And so the idea of Bob as real and the convenience store people and this being a plan to bring them back to shut off the electricity. And there's a lot on Twitter of these new optimistic endings of Twin Peaks things coming up right now. I don't know why. Like, I guess I get a lot of Twin Peaks Twitter stuff, and everyone's like, "Yeah, I knew it. He did it. He brought her back, and she destroyed the electricity and ushered in a new golden age." And I just don't think that doesn't speak to me at all. And there's a lot of interpretations I don't agree with that speak to me, but like
Mhm.
those kinds don't for whatever reason. But I don't think it's because I'm big into like I'm very open to mystical
Yeah.
explanations of all sorts of things, including like just reality as we understand it. Just I don't like it being too paint by numbers.
Yeah. That's interesting. Um, there is a temptation to when you're sorting through the show to say, okay, if A equals B, then how could I make this other thing equal something coherent? So because you want to sort of eventually tie the strands like horizontally as well, if that
Right.
makes any sense. And
Yeah, no, totally.
yeah, I enjoyed the Twin Perfect thing quite a bit, but there were definitely parts of it where he's like, okay, I have these loose ends. How am I going to squeeze and fit them in? And and I also I don't think he like deciphered what the intentions of the show were. I, I disagree with his like thesis in that regard, but
Yeah,
I do like that he put together something that is works for him, and it's like it's internally coherent with a couple of forced square pegs. But
totally. Yeah. No, no, no. Like
you know,
it's just
late,
I don't respond to it, but that doesn't mean it's not good.
yeah,
Like that, like there's so many interesting things like in the whatever hour and a half of it that I could get through. Like there's
yeah,
so many
it's
interesting
a lot.
things that he comes up with. And like that's what's so great about this show. And maybe it does speak to other people, and that's great. Like it's
It's
just not for
incredible
me.
how many different angles, how many takes that
Yeah.
possible to have, and in some ways I think it's in some ways I think the energy in like the discussion of the show is has died down, but I don't really know. I'm not super tapped into it, but like I think for like sort of new angles, it's exciting when you see one because they're not as fast and furious. But it's amazing how much could be said about this show. Late lately, I'm thinking, and it'll change because it always does. If you could find a satisfying like interpretation or theory, be it small or grand theory, if you could find one that's like satisfying to yourself and it passes your own personal like BS filter, which is the hard part, then I think you got something there. Like for each person, I'm not, and I that's a bit of a cop out because it would be nice to say here's like the here's the
Definitive.
meaning of the show. Here it is. But I think that might be what it is. Maybe you gotta sort of construct your own
Totally.
interpretive, I don't know, creative interpretation that also passes your own BS filter. And that, I think that's the real trick, because that's the hard,
Yeah.
because we all know when
Yeah.
something doesn't smell right.
Yeah, no,
Or we
that's
try, or maybe we
totally
don't
right.
all know, because maybe Nadine didn't know until the end. Maybe you don't know, but you think you know.
You said when you earlier you said like you get panicked when you start ask when somebody asks you like what's your grand unifying theory of Twin Peaks. And I think part of the reason we get panicked is because we don't really want that to fully work. And like I think you're right that it has to pass your bullshit detector. It has to pass your BS detector, but the BS detector isn't like focused on just, oh, but that doesn't explain this scene in part
Mhm.
7.
Right.
It's more just that you're tying things together that and making connections that just don't that you're just doing to make your theory work.
Yeah.
That's a BS detector, or you're just off. You're missing, like, that's what I think people who say it was an optimistic ending,
Mm.
like, I feel like they're just off on the tone of it and the aesthetic of how that's, and the music and the at the end, and the look on Cooper's face and the look on Laura's face. Although it's pretty interesting what you guys were talking about. I listened to your thing on part 18, how
Mm.
Laura only at the end gets kind of panicked and screams, but up till then is more in a daze and just kind of going along with it, confused, but like, well, here I am. Like, I see what this is about.
Yeah.
But still, it's just I feel like to come away with that with optimistic, that wouldn't pass my bullshit detector. But that's me, you know. Like it's
Yeah.
just like you're missing the feel of it somehow, which is just purely subjective, I get. But yeah,
But there's something in the tone, there's something in the mood that is
yeah.
just contradicts any feeling of
This wasn't the defeat
optimism.
of Judy, like the definitive, like, and let the golden age come in and we're all happy now. That's not how the return leaves you feeling, I think, especially certainly not the first time you see it where you're just like, what the fuck, you
Yeah,
know?
maybe people who have a super long history with the show, and I don't. Now
Yeah.
it's I guess going on 4 years. Um, there's a lot. There's a lot of emotion as well in there. So, and that's another thing that's great about the show. It's such a mix of emotion and personal investment, and sometimes insane amounts of personal investment. Um,
Insane amounts.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Like,
that,
because there's so many great podcasts on it. Like, there's like
yeah.
10 like A plus podcasts on Twin Peaks. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
there's extraordinary stuff out there. There really is. Um, the Actually, I'm gonna pause just for 1 second. All right, sorry for that. I just had a unplanned little weather interruption. Do do you think so? How does like the Laura's dream? And I'm not sure how literally you're using the word dream, because there's a lot of connotations of that word.
Mhm.
How, how would that be not sort of an optimistic spin? Because if I heard earlier, it's almost in some ways it's like the dream trying to wake up the dreamer to some extent, and there is apparently some sort of breakthrough that happens. Just bear with me a second. Do you remember when Diane is saying it's like the Tulpa Diane, and we know that because she gets shot and then vanishes, but
Yeah.
it seems like the real Diane is inside her in some way, or is trying to break through.
Hmm.
I'm not me. I'm in a
Yeah.
sheriff station.
Yeah. She doesn't seem like I watched that, like
Yeah.
where she pulls out the gun. It's almost like she's warning them.
Hmm.
She's like, I like this is like, get ready.
Yeah.
Cause
Yeah.
yeah,
It sure
the
seems that way.
yeah. Yeah.
And whether Diane is inside her or like it's the tulpa Diane is like a mix of the programmable part and like the
Hmm.
independent part.
Yeah.
But she does not break through. You know, like the real Diane does not override like the tulpa one. And
Hmm.
I've said this before, but the Carrie Page Laura thing at the end, it seems like something breaks through. You know,
Hmm.
like some sort of real, or maybe not real. So, do you see any optimism in that, or do you see that differently, or?
Um, yeah, that's a good question because
And
I think the answer
it's
is
not that
yes.
optimism is important because I don't really feel it is important. But I'm sorry to talk over you, but go ahead.
No, no, no. I think the answer is yes. There is like when I react against the optimistic ending, it's more the kind of cosmic optimism of the ending. The idea that like the lodge has been defeated, Judy has been defeated, the evil spirits, but like, and the electricity goes out in the house. And so uh, that's the thing that doesn't work for me. Laura making a little progress in this journey, being brought back to her house, and oh my God, maybe I am Laura Palmer. Like, when they mention Sarah, she does go, Sarah, we don't know why, but she does. So like something is stirred in her. But then when you go back, they're just back in the red room afterwards. So like in that sense, it's like there's still cycles to go before this gets resolved, but maybe but maybe a step has been taken on the path to get there. Um, and in that sense, even Cooper did something good, which
Mm.
would be nice, Like,
Do you see?
as someone who only started watching the show in 2020, you probably didn't have the thing that a lot of the season 1 and 2 David Lynch people had, or Twin
Yeah.
Peaks people had, of this, like, season 3 sucks, like, because you weren't that attached to coffee and donuts and all that stuff to begin with, right?
Mhm. Yeah, there was no sense of betrayal or
Yeah.
feeling like it ripped the wound open or ripped my heart out or anything like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, I do
There's
remember posting something like on Facebook, which is pretty much just my family is
yeah.
is on Facebook. But I was like, I finally started watching Twin Peaks. This is probably the best thing I've ever seen, and that was like after 2 episodes. And then
Yeah.
after the fifth one, I wrote, "It's confirmed. This is the best thing I've ever seen."
It is. It
And
is.
then I just powered through like all of it, and I was ecstatic at the end of the return.
You were like even the first time through.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, the return just completely blew my mind as far as what I was watching and thinking and experiencing and feeling. And then the end, I was like, I felt like it was a home run on a. I didn't have all that years and years and years of emotion, but just as far as like what people working together on a project can do, what they can do.
It's
It was like
beautiful.
it was almost like a human. It was like a building a cathedral or something. It was like a
Well,
pinnacle. I felt like it was like a pinnacle of like human achievement.
it's like art. Yeah.
I
Yeah, no, it's
know it's a little
crazy.
exaggerated, but if that, that was my initial reaction. I'm like, it did it, like they did. Holy crap, they did it. They actually did it.
And they did it like, and they hit it out of the park. They did it. They changed television again, like maybe not in the, maybe there's the ripple effects will, but it's just like it's incredible. And did you watch one of the things my daughter and I watched? We got the Blu-rays and then we did a rewatch of the show, and then that like 7-hour documentary done by that German guy. Did you
Yeah.
watch that?
Oh yeah.
That's where you get the beautiful, like, oh, you get to know the key cast members, the script supervisor,
Mhm.
Sabrina
Yeah.
Sabrina Sutherland. Yeah, like you just and you see them and you see how everyone's working on this like great project, and you see how David Lynch works with the actors, and it's just, yeah, it is. It's like my daughter, I think, like is now she's at film, she's in the film program at UT.
Oh
I
well.
think that's the thing that did it. Like
Oh,
just seeing like what it is to work on a beautiful project like this and collaborate, and yeah.
yeah, it's got to be like a dream come true for people in that field because, and then what you often hear is actors or crew or whomever, they're like, it's not usually like this, you know.
Yeah, that's right.
Like we know we're experiencing something really special because this is not how it usually goes. I could recommend if you haven't seen it, you know, the masterclass website. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, well,
Yeah, yeah, he
David
did
Lynch has
something.
one. Yeah,
Yeah. You
and
liked it?
yeah, I thought it was super cool. Yeah,
Oh,
it was
awesome.
really great, and certainly she would want to at least see some segments of it.
Yeah.
Uh, even I could even just like hand pick a few segments and send it to you because um it, oh man, it certainly romanticizes like that whole endeavor of making like film art. Um, to what extent it's unrealistic, I don't know, but when you have good people working together, you know, and sort of working in a similar direction, you know, that's in any endeavor, but this particular like creative field that combines together like, you know, 10 different elements of of
Yeah.
creativity, it just really seems great. And you know how people who are good at teaching, they explain things and they sort of make it sound like it's easy
Yeah.
and it's just not.
Yep.
Well, that's kind of one of the things that's happening there because I think David Lynch is he's explaining like somewhat complicated stuff, but he has a handle on it where he could sort of say it straight, like straightforward and simple. And that's a skill. And
Yeah. Like he seems to really connect with the actors, with
yeah.
the crew. One thing I wanted to ask you about, because I saw a big chunk of the what you did on episode 18, with that murderer's row of Twin Peaks talent that you
Yeah.
had, like Courtney Collins, Joel Bacco, yeah, John Thorne, and a bunch more.
Yeah.
You told this story that I don't think anybody there knew, which is Mary Reber
Hmm.
was not originally, as they were shooting, going to be in the final scene. Um, and then Lynch was rewriting it and just came up and said, "How would you like to be in the scene?" And she said, "Sure." And he said, "Where?" And then they just rehearsed on the lawn. And then they is so like, what do you make of that? That just came out. I mean, I know Lynch does this. He changes stuff all the time. He's rewriting constantly, but something that fundamental to what it seemed like part 18 was all about, getting closer to reality, like just came out of the blue like that on the day of shooting. Is that right? Did I
Um,
hear that right?
maybe, maybe. I don't remember exactly like what I said, and I don't know if like I don't know if that character's part existed. I don't have any
Right.
information on that. I've asked that many times.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if somebody else was going to play that role. I don't know if you know what the creators had in mind heading into the filming in that house. Um but I do remember, and I have the notes somewhere to confirm, but I remember she said he was doing some writing on the fly, or rewriting. So I don't know if it was writing or rewriting. I do remember they like I think they rehearsed like out on the lawn, like in a circle. And she said it was just like maybe two takes or something.
Yeah.
It went like really well. She was advised to, I think, like count to 10 in between lines because um you could always cut a long pause. You could always cut the tension down, but you can't really build it up.
That
Yeah,
makes sense.
she was, it was cool. She told me a couple things that were interesting and surprising to me, but
But
I don't have
what's
full
certain
confirmation
is
on that. I
What's
don't.
certain is she wasn't going to be in the scene.
I
Uh,
think. I think that's certain.
yeah,
So that's
that's amazing.
crazy. Yeah,
That's
because
crazy.
this is the end. You know, it's it's the
It's
big
the
one.
final freaking scene of the show.
It's so to imagine that. I don't know. This is like the big one. Maybe was
Yeah.
it not meant to be the ending? You know, like was it just gonna? Did it exist in some other form? Um,
It's like if Orson Welles was like, "Oh, hold on, make him say, Rosebud or something, like at the end, like just on the fly right there. It's just like it's so like
yeah.
it seems so to have the actual owner of the house living in the house right there seems like you're saying something about, thematically. Yeah, that actually doesn't fit well the with a dream theory, or like maybe the Laura dream theory, but does say something so deep about the show and our connection with the show and what we want versus what is actually happening. And
So,
yeah, I just
can
think
you
that's
say?
like that's he just works at a different level
Yeah.
than most people.
Can you say a little more about that? Like, as far as like what we want versus what is happening. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, like that's such a theme of the return, right? Like it just doesn't. It deliberately withholds things that you go in, especially if you're a big fan of the show. And I'm not like you, where I didn't watch the show, but I wasn't like this incredible fanatic about the show when
Yeah.
it came out. I don't even think I watched it when it came out. I saw it on videotape soon after, and then rewatched it in prep for this because I loved David Lynch.
Mm.
Um, but like you do, even just doing that rewatch of the first two seasons, you like Cooper, you want that, you're getting the donuts, you're getting little pieces, little tastes. And then the whole thing with Dougie, like it's not trolling exactly what they do, but it's closer to trolling than it is fan service for sure, to just like let you see the red shoes or let Dougie taste coffee and really like it, but still like you keep expecting him to wake up. Obviously, this is the whole thing. And then he does for like a half an episode, and then that's stripped away from you. And then, you know, I think anybody who watches the show will remember watching part 18 and like thinking, okay, I'm going to get an answer to Audrey. I'm going to figure out where Audrey is, and I'm going to figure out like what's going on and why he's wait,
Mm.
Richard. Okay. Well, at least we're going to get some like light, shed some light on that. And then just as they're driving, like just that there's not that much time left in the show. What's going on? Why are they still driving? And then you get that, like it's from start to finish. It doesn't give you the thing that a part of you, maybe a lesser part,
Yeah.
but a big part of you is calling for, desperate for, and yet you just love it anyway. And so I think
Yeah.
like, oh, so today that's the long way of answering this question about, like, I think this is like a key Lynchian theme, right? Reality versus what we want reality to be, project reality to be, act in a way that reality has to be like this or I won't happen, is one thing. And then, but part 18 is more in real reality where, you have Valeros, and
Mhm.
the Twin Peaks is dark, and the like just you're just on long freaking drives, and it's just not that's kind of the show. It's like this, obviously the nostalgia critique, but it's also just like, yeah, this thing that you want, that's what's so incredible about the show. It deliberately withholds the things that you want, and yet you love it anyway. And maybe you need to watch it a second time to fully appreciate like some of the Dougie scenes, but you love it. You just absolutely love it because it's giving you something that you've never seen before. So that's kind of what I meant is like, and
Yeah.
so having her there feels like it represents reality in some way. It feels like it represents, no, we're not in your dream of Twin Peaks right now. We're in this town as it really is.
Hmm.
And so for him to just think of that on the spot is crazy.
I, I can't even imagine if that was happening at once, like on the spot. I would love, I mean, I don't think we're ever going to see the script. I know
Yeah.
Kyle MacLachlan got to read the whole script, and apparently there was a lot more. Um, there was a lot more going on with Dougie being like somewhat lucid in the script that didn't end up in the show. So that's
Really
interesting. But I would
interesting.
love to see what that scene was initially written as, if it was a scene at all, or what.
Hmm.
But also, well, then you got the dead guy in Odessa in Carrie Page's house. So
Hmm.
so I don't know how much of that part feels like reality, but the drive,
Kind of.
that is how a
But
boring.
also there's this guy in the
Yeah,
living room dead and nobody's acknowledging that,
yeah.
like, and he's got this protuberance out of his belly. Like, so it's kind of reality and it's kind of not. That's what's weird about part 18 is
Uh-huh.
it's like it's definitely closer to reality like today or
And then
but
very much
there's
not.
still weird things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So does it give us, it might not give us what we want, but it gives us what we need, or so, because it gives us so much more than just getting what we want. If you're into it. If you're not into it, then so be it. But
I
if you're
think it gives you what we need because what we needed wasn't closure. Like that's the famous David Lynch line, which I quote all the time. Closure just gives you an excuse to forget you saw the damn thing. Like that is I think the heart of his work. And the fact that we're still talking about it now and you've done all this work talking with all these people and debating and John Thorne's written books and like I got my daughter the Courtney
stalling,
Collins
yeah.
Collins, yeah,
Courtney's
that book.
stalling with ST. Yeah,
Stallings, yeah. That's
yeah,
a great book. And
yeah. And did your daughter
like
like that book?
she did a
Oh,
lot.
cool. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just like it's a test it's that wouldn't happen if it was like a puzzle movie. It was like The Sixth
Yeah.
Sense or The Usual Suspects or something like that. And you just know the answer to it. And that's that. Um, that's not like it's a true gift that that people can still come up with all these different interpretations, and I think it's designed that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, maybe there's a philosophy or something that's built into the show and that's part of the design. But I did want to, if it's okay with you, I did want to touch upon philosophy a little bit,
Sure.
because that's an experience for me that I don't get to have, and I want to be like a little bit selfish. So, um, well, as somebody who's, I guess, trained in philosophy, whatever that might mean, does that enter into your like viewing experience? Like, do you think, when you're watching a show like Twin Peaks or maybe one of Lynch's movies, do you feel like you're in some ways coming at it as just Tamler, or in some ways you're coming at it as Tamler who's trained as a philosopher and trained in these other ways as well? Or I don't know.
I think it's the reverse. I think, I mean, it's hard to be fully, it's not fully transparent to you, but like how do you work these things out in your own psyche. But
Mhm.
I honestly think Twin Peaks and David Lynch has influenced my philosophy and my approach to philosophy like 10 times more than the reverse.
Wow. Okay.
Um, and I think it's an so trained as trained, quote unquote, as an analytic philosopher, which uh, wants answers, clear writing,
Oh,
precision, rigor. And David Lynch is fundamentally about mystery, right? And like that's kind of those are opposing things. Um, what analytic philosophy, kind of classical analytic philosophy, you're giving these arguments and you're using logic and you're being very meticulous and very precise. And, you know, Lynch is not, that's not what he's interested in. And I think, like, temperamentally, it's also not what I'm interested in.
hmm.
And so, what I would say, the influence has been the other way. And, like,
Interesting.
I really think, like, Plato is now a philosopher that uh, I mean, obviously it's Plato, but like, for a long time, I thought of Plato as just one of these guys that set the stage, set the table for philosophy for the next 2,500 years, was obviously a genius, but like, wasn't exactly for me. It was a little too metaphysical. It was a little too bogged down in details of arguments and stuff like that. And I really do think that I Lynch and the whole experience of watching his movies and then Into the Return opened my eyes about what, like, Plato, like the riches that Plato offers. And I think there's a lot of connections
Wow.
there. So do you want me to say like a couple things
Yeah,
about
yeah.
what the
That's
connections are?
extremely interesting. Yeah. Uh,
So, one thing about Plato that I'm sure you know is that he only wrote dialogues, right? He never wrote treatises, and he never wrote like essays. Even though people were writing those things at the time, he
hmm.
never did that. He only wrote dialogues, often, almost always with Socrates as the main character. But he never put himself in any of the dialogues. And because of that, we don't know what Plato thought about all the philosophical questions and positions that are presented and explored in all the dialogues, right? And so people will call certain positions Platonic, and they're usually the ones that Socrates defends,
Hmm.
but that's speculation. Like, we don't know. That's only because they just decide to say, well, Plato believes what Socrates believes here. And Socrates is often contradicts himself. He often is refuted. He's often gives bad arguments.
Hmm.
Um, so just as an example, like the Republic, the most famous Plato dialogue, there are some people like Karl Popper who think, oh, this is Plato defending a totalitarian, regime led by philosophers. And it reflects Plato's hatred of democracy because democracy is what killed Socrates. And then there's other scholars equally, distinguished, who think, no, this was just a reductio ad absurdum of any kind of notion that philosophers should enter politics,
Hmm.
and is really just about the individual. And so you get completely different takes on one, probably the most famous text in Western philosophy,
Hmm.
and we'll never know who was right. So who does that, like, that's pretty cool. And it's like, again, like this, Lynch stuff, as we've been talking about, is all about hermeneutics, like interpretation, like, and that now that opens the door for Plato, right? Like, Plato ended famously so many of the dialogues in this place of deep uncertainty, right? Like, the Greek word is aporia,
Hmm.
puzzlement, like an impasse, right? They've been debating these questions, and they've proposed a bunch of answers, refuted a bunch of the answers, but they never found one that works, and so now they're uncertain, right? And it's like, and we're even uncertain whether the answers worked or not. Sometimes the refutations aren't good, and it just ends like, I don't know. Um, like, why would he do that? This is where I think that Lynch quote opened the dialogues up for me, because this idea of closure being an excuse to forget you've seen the damn thing or read the damn thing. That's how I think Plato saw philosophy, right? Like, he thought it was this dynamic thing that involved conversation. Like, it's constantly active, constantly in flow. He was very, like, in the dialogues at least, opposed to writing, and opposed to speech giving,
Mm.
right? Because it had to be a conversation and had to be people in this dynamic relationship playing off each other.
It
And
couldn't be like one way rhetoric to like a waiting audience, right?
exactly, right. It has to be this kind of ongoing philosophical conversation that will generate more conversations. And that's how he thought. Like, honestly, like, Socrates never wrote down anything. He only talked to people. Plato didn't do that, but I think he tried to do the next best thing, which is model that, right? And I think, like, we've been talking about Lynch and Twin Peaks, like, and Mark Frost. I don't mean to keep minimizing him, but, like, there's no pop culture thing that has generated more ongoing conversations than Twin Peaks. So that's a kind of meta philosophical connection, and I really mean this sincerely when I say that I think it's just not just Lynch's stuff and Twin Peaks, but also the way people interpreted it, the way they approached it, that opened my mind to a way of approaching philosophy very late in my career,
Wow.
actually, that I hadn't done before. Um, and then I guess I'll say one more kind of substantive connection
Mhm.
with Plato is with the cave. The famous image from the Republic of the cave, right, where Socrates outlines this view of our world as it's not even just an illusion, like how we see the world. You and I are looking at the world right now. It's not just an illusion, but it's shadows of an illusion, right? We're prisoners in a cave, and we're looking at shadows that are cast by artifacts, like models of real objects that are in front of a fire. And we think that's reality, right? Like, that's what we think reality is. But if we make the journey upstairs, like, go up, stairs are kind of big in Lynch,
Mhm.
probably a stretch, but if you go out of the cave, right, you're blinded by the sun at first, the light of the sun, and it's unpleasant. But then your eyes adjust and you see what's actually real for the first time: real trees, dogs,
Mhm.
people. And then we realize, oh, this is the thing. And then and all of these things are illuminated by the sun now, not in a blinding way, but in a like a way that allows you to see it. And yeah, like, so okay, um that the sun in the Plato image is an analog. This is explicit for the form of the good, right? The form of the good. Everything derives from the form of the good. Everything is illuminated by the form of the good, and everything derives from it, right? So there is that, like, Laura opening her face and the light comes through. There is this light, this white light that corresponds to something good in Lynch. And I think it's that. But here's the thing, right? Like, if you're a prisoner in the cave, you've
Mhm.
spent this long time, a big part of your life at least, thinking these shadows of artifacts are the real thing. And there's a kind of comfort you get in that, right? And when a philosopher comes down from the outside the cave and says, hey, look, you gotta, like, this isn't real. Like, we get pissed, right? We will put
Yeah.
them to death if we have to, make them drink hemlock, right? But always there's a part of us that kind of yearns for that, right? And that's like number one theme in Lynch's work. is that like you get the sense that what we think reality is, what's on the surface, isn't reality, that there's something going on. There's a substratum and underneath, right? That characters don't want to face. They can't see and they don't want to see, right? And we know that Lynch thinks that the world is essentially a dream, right? Not real, but that you can get these glimpses of reality. And yeah, again, Laura taking her face off, Cole when he goes up into the swirl almost, but then has to get pulled back down, like the philosophers who want to stay out of the cave, but end up having to like go back in and lead the people out. I don't know, that's a hard, that's the one kind of substantive first order connection with the philosophy I'm familiar with and Lynch. But there's so many others too.
Yeah, that's extremely interesting. And then I guess eventually your eyes, so to speak, adjust to the sun or adjust to the illumination that the
And,
sun.
and then you're free. You're free and you're facing the truth, like Nadine, I think. Like she came
Why
out of the cave.
I have a friend he's sort of like a old time, old time conspiracy type guy.
Yeah.
None of this new stuff.
I love that.
Stuff he scoffs at the news,
Yeah.
but also a very deep and profound, just a cool guy all around, great storyteller. And for me, the conspiracy stuff is a form of storytelling more than anything else. He's just like pure narrative. Like any topic, he's got a
Like what's
good
his
story.
best conspiracy?
Uh, Probably something I'm not comfortable talking about right now. Like a more accessible one would be things like sylphs and chemtrails, and that there's like etheric war happening up in the skies when you look and you see clouds that are shaped like angels, that it might not just be clouds. There might, yeah. But anyway,
Oh,
that's
so it's not like conspiracies like the CIA killed
there's
John
some
F.
of the, yeah,
Kennedy.
there's some of that too, but that's like low level. Like
This
a lot of it is
it's
like super
cosmic. It's
metaphysical.
more
Yeah.
cosmic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Well,
good.
I would say he runs the gamut, but he has a metaphor that I love. And basically you have a breakthrough where you get from you, you get out of the cave, so to speak, or
Mhm.
you get into a new room, you get through the window or through the locked door, and you get there and you're like I got it. And then the camera zooms out
Yeah.
and the guy is just on the first floor of like a
Yes.
room building,
Yeah.
and that
That's
one
right.
always sticks with me. Anytime I feel like I have a bit of a breakthrough, I'm like, okay, but zoom out,
Yeah.
because I'm
Totally.
so certain.
Are
And then,
you a meditator at all? That's a very common feeling when you're meditating,
oh,
is
okay.
to feel like you have a glimpse and
Mm,
then it's just either pulled away from you or you realize, oh no, I'm just, I've made it one layer through the delusion,
yeah.
but that's it, you know.
I'm not. I find it all very interesting. But I don't know. I guess I have my own ways of of doing things, but it never like through deliberate
Yeah.
meditation. But yeah, but even in terms of like, I'm not really into politics anymore. I used to be pretty like into it, but even in realms like that, um, the assumption that you're having this breakthrough, the assumption that you're having this
Mhm.
aha moment and you got something is, I think I overly check myself. But that impulse is just there.
Yeah.
Like that you're the first person you're the easiest person to delude, and this celebratory feeling of feeling like you uncovered something, or that you've sorted out some sort of argument. Um, I don't know. I have some problems with that where I overdo the uncertainty, and sometimes a little too non-committal perhaps, or a little, or not non-committal, but just a little skeptical of my own knowledge.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
that's just me. I
because
don't
it's like,
understand.
yeah, I mean, it's the right attitude in one sense. It's a rational attitude to be
Mm,
skeptical of because what are the odds that you've really figured out this
Yeah.
this deep thing? But it's also, one of the things I appreciate about these huge theorizers about Twin Peaks is even if they're ultimately like what they uncover along the way, even if ultimately I just don't buy their thing, like John Thorne's book, Ominous Whoosh,
Yeah.
which I kind of fundamentally disagree with because I don't think the return is as much about Cooper. And there's certain things, actually, I want to ask you about one that I don't even fully understand.
Hmm.
But how cool is reading that book and all the things that he uncovers? So there's something about just letting yourself, go beyond your skeptical,
Yeah.
defenses that allows you to do something that's very valuable. And I think I'm more on your side. I end up distrusting myself too much and
Hmm.
being too skeptical. It probably prevents me from, um, fully committing to something, and whatever riches you get along the way when you do that.
Yeah, that's really nicely put. Because there, yeah, just the freedom to allow yourself to plunge. I, I have the book right here because I was going to recommend it to you, but
Yeah, I do have
obviously
it.
you're
Yeah.
familiar with it. And not to plug my own stuff, but I had a couple one-on-one chats with him about the process of putting the book together, and then like another discussion which was all about the cut parts, the parts that
Yeah.
didn't make it. And that was probably my favorite, uh
Like the
my favorite
stuff that
thing.
he cut out of the book.
Yeah, and that was really fascinating because that was all about the process of editing oneself, and it's very much on cue with what we were just talking about,
Mm.
where you sort of allow the field thinking to take over because the show and Lynch kind of that's like sort of a commandment, and field thinking, as I've understood it, um, is sort of like a synonym for intuition, which
Mhm.
I believe Lynch has said is intuition is sort of like feeling feeling plus thinking combined into one, into some sort
Yeah.
of unity. And that he recommends that that's sort of the way, one way, but maybe a very recommended way to work your way through interpreting or experiencing the show. But I
Yeah.
forget exactly where I was going, but I did want to ask you about like the idea of field thinking and philosophy. Is that something that is a part of like the field, the discipline? Is it something that you have found yourself doing or not doing? Is there like an analogous term for it? Is it
Feel thinking.
intuition?
Oh, intuition. Yeah. Well, that's a vexed topic in analytic philosophy. Which kind of runs by testing people's intuitions about often the most boring questions imaginable that they have no intuitions about. But like, so it has its own kind of loaded, very much not Lynchian meaning sometimes in philosophy. It is the thing that allows you to say, like say, okay, this premise is true. If it's an ethical premise, it's like you're not going to get, you have to go by your intuition. Sometimes you're in like suffering is bad. Yes, that's the kind of thing that like people will talk about intuitively. That's true. It's self-evident, or however you think of intuitions. Um, but the more feel thinking idea that's not stripped bare of anything interesting about it, like how we tend to do in analytic philosophy, is that's too strong, but not,
Yeah.
but also fair. Um, that I think is a big um, part of some continental stuff that I want. Like, so, there's division between continental philosophy, which is more like Heidegger and Sartre, and, like maybe with some overlap, Nietzsche and Kierkegaard and Husserl. Like, these are they're European, they're on the continent. They write in, these ways that are not clear and not rigorous, but like often to their benefit.
Hmm.
Like th they are, I think, more in touch with this idea of like there's ways we process information that you can't call it emotional, you can't call it fully cognitive, and unlike an analytic philosophy that likes to make a clean distinction between those two things, they feel less bound to that because they're just creating stuff out of from scratch
I
often.
see.
So I think that is like if you want to talk to somebody about the kind of intuition that Lynch often refers to in interviews and probably the way he thinks we should approach his works, like I really think the Continental philosophy, Merleau-Ponty, Henri Bergson, like those kinds of people, even though I can't speak on it because I'm only looking at it from afar, see more in that spirit because it's more of that dynamism. It's more
Hmm.
of that like it can't be conceptually and cleanly delineated in the way that analytic philosophy has kind of created itself to be about.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Is it like less amenable to like syllogisms, I guess, in some way? I don't
The
know a lot about
Continental
his.
stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah, they don't write like that, and sometimes you have no idea what the fuck they're talking about.
yeah.
And sometimes it seems like you've discovered like the one thing you've been like deeply puzzled about. And like that. So it is like it's hit or miss in terms of if you're coming at it from a layman perspective, which I basically am, because you don't get trained in that stuff at all
Okay.
in an analytic grad program.
Oh,
But uh I feel like they're on the wavelength that David Lynch is working on much more than the kind of dry clinical analytic stuff that I am a part of.
I
You
see.
know, yeah.
So you must feel pretty balanced out, pretty well-rounded, I guess. Because I do hear like a little bit of a what's the word I'm looking for? Not regret, maybe regret, but that maybe you wish you had a little more of the, for lack of a better term, Lynchian flair in your philosophical training. I don't know, but it sounds like you've really rounded that circle
Yeah, so
yourself.
I wasn't a philosophy major.
Oh,
Like
okay.
I went to school for playwriting
Oh,
before, and almost kind of I got really lucky to get into a grad program because I really wasn't well prepared for that and didn't even really know what it was. So it's very different than it was
yeah, that hits home.
today. But the good thing about at least the path that I got was I was allowed freedom, and so I could always incorporate art and film and stuff into my work. And I do think like I get very frustrated. Like I'm very disillusioned with a lot of the actual work that is done in philosophy, but I don't have a lot of regret about going into it because I'm not sure that there was anything else I could have pulled off, you know?
Hmm.
Like and the job and the profession allows you to kind of take it in your own direction if you want to and if you're willing to compromise some of the other stuff. So, um, or at least it has. I hope it continues to do that because I think people appreciate it. I always tried to write in a more engaging and clear way and not in the kind of using the heavy terminology. And people would tell me, oh no, if you're going to write public stuff, if you're going to write for the public, that's going to hurt you. But it was the opposite. It never does. But I think people think it will. I think people appreciate it if you actually do it, but they're always told not to do it because it'll hurt them. And yeah, I don't think that's the case. And philosophy could use more of that, or at least my branch.
That's a theme I've heard again and again and again. Like when I first started doing recordings like this and interviews, it was in like an academic field, and the people who chose to speak with me, um, they were all good at speaking simply, you know.
Yeah.
And I always had like the student role. That was basically be my posture, and that was legit. But they could take very complex stuff and just communicate it in a nice way that others could understand. And they weren't tooting their own horn, but they were suggesting, and it's true that like that's a level of intelligence, or that's a level of skill that a lot of people have chosen to not cultivate, or maybe just don't have it naturally. Or but if you could, you know, if you could take sophisticated or even just difficult stuff and say it in a conversational way for somebody like me to understand, then you know you're really doing something. So
Yeah. And like I think even the people who are quote unquote experts appreciate it.
yeah,
Nobody likes to try
100.
to puzzle out some highly technical, rigorous, but really confusingly presented position if they don't have to. And yeah, that's so yeah. Um,
Would you agree with the following? A lot of people say that like academic books that are written for the public, um, you know, but have like a research core. There's a name for those types of books.
Trade books.
Trade.
Yeah.
Okay. Would you agree that they often have about like 10 to 12, 10 to 20 pages of core content, and then there's a lot of filler? Um, or would you say that that's unfair? Because I know you've written at least one of those, right?
Yeah. My last book, Why Honor Matters, was like technically a trade book. It was at a press, basic books that kind of is on the border. It was kind of perfect in terms of counting for my academic work, but
Okay.
also being able to be a trade book in that way. I would say that the best of those books aren't like that,
Hmm.
like at all. Like I don't include mine. I don't feel like I fully yet have, and maybe will never find my exact voice for a public text. I think I'm proud of the book.
Hmm.
Um, but sometimes I think podcasting is a more natural medium for me to be able to be me, you
Hmm.
know? And I, as much as I try to do that in that book, and I think I'm only partially successful. But the, yeah, I think the best books you feel like you're learning a shitload and it's
Yeah.
not padding. And if it's padding, it sucks. I'd much rather like I have to look things up to keep up with what they're doing in a good
Mhm.
trade book than but the best of them so here's a great example of this book, Passions Within Reason by Robert Frank. He's a Cornell economist,
Mhm.
like not someone you would think would just write something that could shape
Page turner.
the
Yeah.
way you approach your like work and even the way you're thinking. But he has a really interesting theory about human emotions and motivation and their connection to rationality that he lays out in the most plain and simple terms. And yet it's just, yeah, it's profound, and
Mhm.
there's no uh there's no work in reading it. And it's like, and I think there's, the best of the books are like that. But there's plenty of stuff exactly like you say, where
Yeah.
it started out as a paper that got a little play, and so they turned it into a book, but there's no more content than what was in the original paper.
I see. Could because even if I get like the skeleton, like bones version of something, I still want the meat.
Hmm.
So you could always get a, you know, a summary or a basic, you know, half page thesis statement, but I want the meat because that's where the life is.
Yeah.
And
I mean, one of
otherwise,
the
and that's where the remembering is, at least for me.
One of the saddest things is kind of the descent of Richard Dawkins as a, like an intellectual that was uh could be enlightening and great to read, and then just to see where he's gone in the last 15 years, once he thought it was his life's mission to make everyone not believe in God. But
Mm.
some of those early books are just phenomenally good, and you're going to learn stuff about evolution and biology that you just didn't know. And maybe some of it will be, you're going to find out later was a little over some, but there's a lot of substance in those books, and they're written in, like, he's a great writer. He was a great writer. Like, it's one of the saddest things. I was so inspired by like the extended phenotype and the selfish gene when I wrote them. And now when I see him, he's got, like on Twitter, he's one of the worst Twitter presence, one of the most disappointing Twitter presences ever. But like that to me is a model for how you can pack a ton of substance into something that is still engaging to read, and you'll learn a ton.
I see.
Yeah.
Now I'm not going to ask you for the Cliff Notes version, but can you explain simply or not simply, like, what the concept of honor? Because I know you wrote a book about it, and if you can connect it to Twin Peaks or any of Lynch's work, you know, that would be welcome, but certainly not required. Like is honor explored in Twin Peaks at all, or and also what is honor? Is it as obvious as we might think, or
Do we think it's obvious? Uh,
I don't know.
yeah. Um, well, I mean,
I mean,
so like
honor,
the first chapter of
honor
my
your
book
honor your
is
grandfather or something, honor your grandparents. That would be like the one, like, sort of obvious way I think that people would think about it.
so the book grew out of less the term honor and more a lot of this anthropological cross-cultural research on honor cultures versus
Yeah.
non-honor cultures and the norms and values of honor cultures that involve, sticking up for yourself, responding to insults, loyalty to family, loyalty to your in group, um, and honesty and hospitality,
Mm.
and then also the violence and some of the destructive things that can come from a society that's more oriented around honor, maybe, and your role, and the respect you get from the community, and less oriented around individual achievement in the way that, what they call dignity cultures are.
Mm.
And so, in terms of what honor is, like, it's to me, those questions are like, well, it's a word that means a ton of different things. And the whole first chapter of the book is all the different ways in which we use the word honor. Like you said, honor your grandparents, honor society, honor code, honor, like there's so many that word just gets put, and it, like just trying to pin down a specific meaning to me seems like, well, I don't think that's how concepts work in general.
Mm.
And even if it does work in general for some, it's definitely not going to work for honor. It can mean so
Okay.
many different things. And even the different honor norms, where they are explicitly honor norms, will vary from culture to culture pretty dramatically. So, um, your question about honor in Twin Peaks is really interesting, though, because I'm not sure I ever thought of it. Well, by the time Twin Peaks came out, I had already read the book, and I'm someone, and like, I mean, written the book, it was
Yeah.
out. Once I'm done with a project, I'm often just done with it,
Yeah.
like, to my detriment. Like, I don't follow up on them when people try to talk to me about, this book a few years later because they just came across it, and I'm like, I just don't even know what they're talking about a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But uh, it's so I never really thought about it in terms of Twin Peaks. I mean, my first reaction is I can't think of, you know, like all the different honor norms and codes don't seem to be a big part of Twin Peaks, aside from maybe Cooper and the FBI and the kind of code that is um, sometimes evoked, although it's, you know, never fully clear exactly what that is. But it actually strikes me as not being about a lot of the different on in a way that a lot of movies are. Like I
Hmm.
would say the vast majority of movies you see some of these honor questions, honor controversies come up, honor motivations, honor so deeply tied, I think, to our motivational structure. And yeah, it's just not clear how much anybody is motivated by honor,
Hmm.
aside from Cooper. And it's not even clear that Cooper is that motivated by honor. I don't know. What do you think?
I couldn't think of much, which is why I had the question written down. It's one of the actual. I have so many questions and I haven't asked many of them, but that's one of the ones I had written down. Um,
Yeah, it's weird,
it
actually.
doesn't jump out, you know.
Yeah.
But
And you would
but
think
it's
it's a battle, its
yeah.
forces are aligned against each other, and but it seems more cosmic and metaphysical. And honor is more, I think, maybe down to earth but I don't know. I don't even know if I agree with that.
I do have a question that's not Twin Peaks, but maybe it'll work its way back to it. Whoa.
Oh God, you're losing power.
Yeah, I hope.
Electricity.
Yeah, seriously, it was like a sign. Um, this is just a thought that went through my head as you were talking, and I have no idea what I'm talking about. Is our American culture at large, would it be characterized as more of like an honor type culture or more of like a dignity type culture? And also, um, the if we're more tribalized, especially like in a negative sense with high polarization, is that related to not being an honor? Like, was that is it possible that that is that level of like tribalization is like a substitute for some sort of honor that's missing? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does.
And I didn't mean
And
to go
it's
down a
definitely
rabbit hole
something
here.
no, I mean, this is definitely something I've thought about. I think if to the extent that we're an honor culture, we're a debased honor culture because, you know, part of fighting for honor, fighting for respect is taking risks and suffering costs. And it seems like nobody's interested in doing that. They want the honor and the esteem and um, the destruct, but without putting themselves at any risk. And it's a little too individualistic. I mean, one of the good things about honor cultures are they tend to be more communal, and there tends to be real bonds within the community,
Hmm.
which can be that can sometimes turn turbulent and violent and bad, but overall it's good for us to not be our own little atoms that don't
Hmm.
care about anybody beyond our immediate circle at all, and don't and just anonymously interact with the outside world. So I think that's mostly what we do. And you know, the thing that people say about America and honor is that the American Southeast, and maybe the South a little more broadly into Texas, they came from honor culture. They're more the descendants of honor cultures. And so, you know, you do see a little more hospitality and more violence, like
Hmm.
physical violence in the South, and maybe more sensitivity to insult based on some of the research, depending how much you buy that research. But I think really at this point, we're just too separate, too apart. Even our polarization is not like, you're polarized with your neighbor. You're polarized with people you don't even know, like
Yeah.
people online. You're not fighting with people in community halls. You're not dueling anybody. You're not putting yourself out there. You're just saying stuff online. That kind of polarization, I feel like, is very, it's dishonorable in terms of how I understand honor. And it's like it doesn't have that kind of face to face interaction that I think any true honor culture in the real sense of the word requires, like in its essence.
Yeah, it seems like there's a lot of group stuff without that, like without the honor. Like that would be like a missing variable that could change the dynamic a little bit.
But group in a more abstract way, even, like it would be one thing if these,
Well, group
like
a lot. My friend has a different friend has a saying, and his saying is hate bonds. It's a two-word saying. He's like, that's one of his life mottos. Not on a personal level. Well, sometimes, but he's like, few things bond people together like more than
more,
negative.
yeah, yeah. But I think just the way our society is set up right now, like it doesn't bond them in the way that they're going out. And I mean,
Yeah,
some people obviously are going out and they're marching and they're, for better, sometimes for good,
yeah,
sometimes for bad. But I don't know. It seems like a lot of the stuff just happens in the ether as a kind of simulation of what you would do if you really hated somebody and you really were bonded with other people against them. You're not doing the thing that people used to do when that was the case.
yeah. I don't know. That might explain some of my. I've sort of withdrawn a lot from like any sort of cultural conflict or even political stuff, culture war stuff, because it seems like there's no for me seems like it's time poorly spent more than anything else. So instead, so instead I spend my time with fiction,
It is. Yeah.
like
And
old.
talking to people about Twin Peaks,
Yeah, well, I think within,
life.
but there's some honor stuff going on within like the Twin Peaks like fan culture, but I don't want to get into
Is
that.
that right? Is that right?
I think so. I
Tell
think
me like one or two things.
I just think there are certain norms as far as how to conduct oneself and uh how how not to, and sometimes maybe prices to be paid
So
if
like
they're
what's an
violated.
example?
Um Respect toward other people's opinion and interpretation, and like this concept that like there's like no wrong interpretation is as a sort of a norm, I would say.
Right. Right. That's why the twin perfect guy rubbed
Politeness and
people a lot,
yeah, I think so.
rubbed people the wrong way because he was like, this is it. Like, don't listen now if you don't want to learn the truth. But yeah, I
Yeah,
think that's right. But I think that's a
he
good
was
norm
just
overall.
yeah, I think so. So I don't know if I have any specifics, but I think he was just using the technique of hyperbole for persuasion, and you see that a lot whenever somebody's trying to make a rhetorical presentation. But
It is kind of amazing though, like when you read like the good stuff on Twin Peaks or you see some of the good stuff. Like I think that was almost an outlier in something that had a lot of insight but was grating in terms of how it was
yeah.
presented.
Mm.
Mostly it's like you feel like you're being welcomed into some warm new community. And
Yeah, yeah,
like it's just kind of beautiful.
yeah. I agree with that, and I th- I don't know. It's sort of displaced my previous interests to some extent.
Yeah.
Because it's just, and it wasn't that I wanted to feel good instead of feel bad. It wasn't really so much that, maybe a little bit, but and it's hard for me to explain that. How could I compare the value in talking about this fictional stuff, with random people, or thinking about it on my own, or texting my friend all the time about it?
Yeah.
it's hard to justify the value in that versus like being engaged in the real world.
The real world activities.
um,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like the thing with my daughter was, I think, like any guilt I felt might have felt about just diving into this, like the fact that it was also our own collaborative project,
mm,
watching it and talking about it. And like, honestly, it's at a time for her. She's in middle school, not, like not going great socially at that time,
yeah,
as like is often the case. And so she's home more than she probably would want it to be, but it would give us this time to just watch the stuff. And one good thing is, about being a teacher in the summer, you can just go deep in these things.
yeah,
And yeah, like I'll always be grateful to it for that. Like it'll be the most special thing. Like and we've done, I like she's an only child, so we're very close. But I don't think there's anything more central to our relationship than like the time we've spent with the show, even if it doesn't solve the world's problems. If it yeah, it does something that's worthwhile.
yeah. That's pretty amazing. That's a pretty amazing statement. uh,
Yeah, I maybe I should have thought about it before,
no, no,
but
but
it
that
just came out,
yeah, but
yeah.
this sentiment is absolutely
Yeah.
coming across clearly. Is there are there things that you noticed or thought about or felt or theorized or really whatever, um, when watching with her versus, say watching with a peer or something like that? Anything? I'm sure the answer is yes, but I don't know if anything's coming to mind.
Yeah, and also I like she was almost my only peer watching the show.
Yeah.
And certainly someone willing to rewatch it and talk about
Mm,
it. There was nobody else in my life other than Jesse and Natalia, but that was only, we realized that
I
after
see.
we
Yeah.
had all watched it. Um, but
And isn't
uh,
that funny? I'm sorry to cut you off. Isn't that funny? Like all the people you've met in your
yeah,
life, all the accomplished and intelligent, etc. people, and
yeah, and they
there
just
it
don't
is.
watch the
Yeah,
show.
there it
And
is.
it's like hard to tell them because it's not just that they have to watch season 3, they have to rewatch at least
Yeah,
the first season of season 1, and then like certain key episodes in season 2, and definitely Fire Walk with Me, and before they even enter this 18-hour
yeah.
like journey. So it's like, but yeah, it's very frustrating actually that they're not, and
But she
yeah,
was. Yeah,
but she was. And like you said afterwards, I mean, I'm not like you. I didn't talk to like the smartest people alive watching this, but I still did. I didn't really talk to very many people, but it was nice to find a couple other, uh, you know, hardcore Twin Peaks and David Lynch nerds. And that's like, yeah, the show just builds connections to people. And it's one of the it's obviously one of the great things about it. But yeah, in terms of what my daughter taught me, I think
hmm.
she has an eye for detail. I would have never noticed the hunch,
Yeah,
the similar hunch of Audrey and Cooper at the end of 16 and 18. And like, so there's so many things like that. And, like the best kind of conversations, you start just feeding off each other. This can
yeah,
be good podcasting when this happens, right?
yeah,
You're like, oh yeah, and then this, and then this. So yeah, like pretty much even the Laura's dreaming theory like was developed in conversation with her, as
mm,
much as she was resistant to it. And her theories have been developed, I think like in that same kind of conversation. And yeah, um I think like I like there's very little. I will say there's a bunch of podcasts that I listened to at the time, and I would single out the Diane podcast. Have you listened to that one?
Yeah, killer. Yeah.
Like that just opened my mind in about not just thinking about Twin Peaks, but just thinking about art in general.
Yeah.
Like the
Okay.
way they talked about it was such a good model for how to talk about art. And so, between that whole community and reading about it and then yeah, the ongoing conversations with my daughter, like I feel like that's everything in terms of what I have. I didn't bring that much else to it besides just being lucky to be
Yeah.
involved in that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
feel like I got a lot of education listening to different podcasts about Twin Peaks because I mean these were some really great analytical minds, or at least just good talkers, like very
Yeah.
very
Just like,
eloquent people. And
I know.
I teach eighth grade. I used to teach high school and
Yeah.
English class. And if we're working on an analysis essay, for example,
Yeah.
it might, just as a generic paper, it might be like discuss 3 ways the author builds up a theme that readers can sort of sniff out by the time they're done with the story. And a paragraph or one section, it might just be about, I don't know, like the use of setting or the use of symbolism or whatnot. But things are sort of handled like one at a time. And what I heard in the Diane podcast, and maybe some others, I don't think they have a lot of peers, is a sort of tool set, a skill set that they had acquired separately
Mhm.
over their like academic or analytical career. So, and every tool was available at any moment, it seemed, and fluidly. So it
Yeah.
wouldn't just focus on one thing at a time,
And
And
they would
it's,
build off each other too.
yes, and there
They
was so
would
much.
yes and each other
Yeah, there you go.
better than anybody.
Yep, yep. And that's almost like a collaborative intuitive bull session. Yeah, the yes and technique is really a great way to put it, because that's so much fun. And then afterwards, um, Dean Hurley, guy who does a lot of the sound design with David
Hmm.
Lynch and elsewhere, he's talked about that too. Like say yes while you're in the creative process, and then
Yeah.
afterwards, you could cut everything,
Right.
or you might find things that you save and then you're going to repurpose them later, like for some scene that you didn't expect. But while you're creating, just let it flow, and
Yeah.
yeah, they're really amazing about that. And I wouldn't say intimidating, because I never had similar goals, but just inspiring as far as how people can talk about
Yeah.
any sort of text so fluently. Because I'm like, a lot of what you were saying earlier about your background and your path, I could relate to. I'm not super well trained in the things that I do, but I learned a lot along the way. But I don't feel like a natural. So even talking about like Twin Peaks, this show that I like, I'm blown away by listening to other people talk
I
about it.
know.
And even a couple of the podcasts that you did talking about Mulholland Drive and Fire Walk with Me, just the flow that you guys were getting into was just,
Yeah.
it was
I
so
haven't,
so
God,
fun, so cool, inspiring to listen to,
thank
because
you.
you're just, you're not consciously grabbing for your tools, but they're just there at hand, and you got a good partner, and it's going. It's
The
cool.
Fire Walk with Me was with Weird Studies. Do you know that podcast? That
Yeah, I do.
yeah, they're great. And that was I remember that being a fun conversation. The Mulholland Drive one, I hope did you listen to it really? Like
Yeah, I listened to it a while ago, and then again not that long ago,
it
because
was good. It was okay.
yeah, it was good. Yeah,
I
and
worry about that sometimes because it's so
no,
long ago. I feel like I
it was
wasn't
good.
quite enlightened. Good. I'm
I
so
don't think
glad.
I'm breaking news, but this guy John
Yeah.
he's doing a Mulholland Drive book,
Oh,
and
sweet. I didn't know
yeah,
that. That's
yeah,
great.
I sent that to him. I'm not sure if he checked it, but I said you should add this to your pile of research, because he does a ton of research when he writes.
Yeah.
Uh, I don't
Can
know.
I ask you? We should go, but can I ask you
Yeah.
one question about John Thorne's book?
Hmm.
So his view that the stuff, so he didn't like, well, he liked but didn't want to accept the Tim Crater view that this is all Cooper's dream or Richard's dream. Like
Hmm.
Richard is this guy, so very much like Diane and Mulholland Drive, right? Like that. And yet thought it was very clear that it was filtered through Cooper's consciousness, right? In some way, like this is filtered through his psyche as he's in the red room. But these things are really happening. We're just seeing it filtered through Cooper's lens, right? That's his view.
I think so.
Right. So I don't get that. Like, what does that mean? So what's going on in Las Vegas? And like when you say like is Cooper Dougie? Is he also evil Cooper when he's in South Dakota? Like I don't feel like, it's so fundamental, I thought, to like his core thesis of the book. And yet I never fully understood what we were supposed to believe is real that is being filtered through Cooper's psyche in the red room. You know what I mean? Like, is
Yeah.
there a Dougie? Is the Dougie a tulpa? Or is that something that is projected by Cooper in the red? Like, what's going? Yeah, do you get it?
I think so. There's a Dougie is sort of uh kind of like a man of no action because because if you were to use intention or action or sort of conscious deliberateness, then
Yeah,
you can't be like sort of the pure good half of somebody
yeah,
because all of our actions come with a consequence, whether it's good or bad.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
So so yeah, so Dougie's and I've heard you say something very similar to that. It was interesting.
Yeah, yeah.
That
That's my
by
theory of
doing
Dougie.
nothing, by doing nothing, Dougie creates all this good
Yes,
reaction,
yeah.
which
No effort.
yeah, which in itself is kind of fascinating. Um, but as far as the stuff that is real but filtered through
That's
Cooper's subjectivity,
yeah.
um, I think I don't know. It's been a while since I read the book. I think the book would say most of what we see is just that, but certain scenes are not. Like other people take over the narrative lens. Like we get to see through like Bobby Briggs's eyes when there's the freak out in the middle of the street. Like that's not exactly happening, but that's what his conscious experience of his family falling apart might feel or look like.
Yeah.
All the
Which
black and
is
white stuff wouldn't be Cooper.
no, but I mean like so I'm not saying like what is filtered through
Oh, okay.
his and what isn't. It's more um that when you say that something is filtered through his psyche, like say the stuff that is, so the stuff in Las Vegas,
Hmm.
but what's the actual reality? Like if we didn't
Yeah.
have his filter, is there a Dougie Jones? Is that Dougie Jones really a tulpa? Is there another version of him that's also in South Dakota or Montana
Yeah.
or wherever? Like what's the reality that's getting uh
Are the Mitchum brothers like two thugs like in a hotel room as opposed to in silk robes
yeah,
eating breakfast with
exactly. Right. That and like if it
uh,
was that, if the Mitchum brothers are actually just two, kind of mid-level Las Vegas gangsters that have been kind of glorified, I understand that. What I don't understand is anything that has to do with the story, like that involves Mr. C and Dougie and Gordon Cole and all those things. Like is like what of those things is really happening, even if we're getting it filtered through his lens. That's what I never fully understood.
mm,
Like I wasn't even sure what's being proposed. Why is this better than it being his dream? If the actual reality is not, it's not clear what that even amounts to.
Yeah, and then there's the word dream, which I always nitpick anytime
Yeah.
somebody in writing or through talk uses the word dream, because is it like, is it dream as David Lynch has, I think, used it multiple times, which is sort of like uh we're watching multiple movies on the same screen, and the movie that you see is
Yeah.
is
Different.
the result of your filter, sort of, even though
Yeah.
um
But
and
even in that case, there is the actual movie, right? Like, so
yeah,
you and I are seeing Twin Peaks, and we're projecting and we're seeing it through our filters, and it's a mirror that's in some ways a reflection of us, and our interpretation is going to, but there is still that actual movie, right?
there's still
That's there's
activity.
a
Yeah,
text,
there's
right?
activity happening.
Yeah, and there's a text that is just there. And I just like, what is the text that's getting filtered through Cooper's lens in the Red Room, especially as it involves his various avatars
Yeah.
outside the Red Room. Like it can't just be that, oh, he's Dougie, but we're seeing him not as he really is as Dougie, but filtered through. What does that mean?
Yes. Yeah.
That we're seeing Cooper, we're seeing Dougie filtered through Cooper's lens. Like, who's Dougie? Why does he exist? If is that part, is the origin of Dougie also part of his mind? Then okay, if it is, then who is he? You know, is he the original Dougie Jones? That's what I don't totally get.
Was he a part of the, like, the last episode of season 2, um where Cooper enters the Red Room, and
Yeah,
that's where sort of presumably Mr. C
his appearance. Yeah,
makes his first where's Dougie then?
yeah. I mean, we get, but also, I guess just is Doug like? Is there an unfiltered version of Dougie? Like, is that even a conceptual possibility? I don't know. Maybe I can meet John one day and I'll try to articulate what I don't understand.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, I hope he if nothing else, I'll send this little part.
okay, good. That'd
Yeah,
be,
because I feel like if I were to try to answer, I would just be like BSing my way through it.
yeah.
Um, but yeah,
I could
everything.
just be misunderstanding something too.
I think he will be very articulate in terms of how he hears, and also like addresses the question in a way that I'm not really good at doing. Um, the that part of his book, that part of his interpretation is very tied to his his own skill set, his own training, I think, because a lot of his training was in like narrative theory,
Yeah.
and got really deep into like analyzing how narration could be experimented with. And I think he might even argue that the return does something rather groundbreaking as far as like how narrative is handled, because there's like a lot out there from this guy Seymour Chapman and some others, uh delineating different types of like narrative point of view. But I think John was saying like that was one of the revelations in the return, that it was really doing something like even new, even for Lynch, like it was new even for Lynch. um but I can't really say much
Interesting.
more than that. Yeah, and kind of hard to wrap my mind around. um
Yeah.
but
As
yeah,
Lynch often is.
but now you've reignited that whole topic for me, so I'm actually interested in going back into a couple parts of that book, to and then when I watch this after it's recorded, I'm present in a different way, because as doing podcasts of your own, um, if you're doing sort of like an interview podcast as opposed to a chat with your like regular co-host, it's a little bit of a different dynamic because
Yeah.
I'm trying to be polite.
Yeah.
Trying to make as much eye contact as possible, and I'm stealing glances at the clock. I'm stealing glances at my question list, so like it's hard to be 100%.
Yeah. And I'm
But when
rambling
I
too.
rewatch this, I'm gonna totally, you know, understand exactly what you're
What I'm trying
yeah, yeah,
to
yeah.
get
And
to. Yeah. I
it's
honestly,
interesting.
yeah. I think
But
that,
one of the things on my list is like, all right, how much of Las Vegas is real?
yeah.
It's like
Right.
right at the top. That's always like one of my first questions. What the hell is this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My totally same question. Like, it's hard to believe that we're supposed to see Candy, Mandy, and Randy or whatever
Yeah.
as like we can't like are we supposed to take them literally? Almost certainly not. But at the same, but then what's the reality of them if we're not supposed to take them literally? And
Yeah.
and how does that connect, to anybody's dream or the cosmic battle of good and evil if you want to go down that route. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And one of the best things about your question about Dougie is if you go back to the start of our conversation tonight, Dougie is like the Dougie problem is like sticking in the craw of your theory because
yes,
there's
totally.
you don't have a place for him, so figuring him out is like it's personal.
Yeah, that's the remainder, I think, of any really good Laura
Yeah.
is the dreamer theory is like, okay, but and Dougie, like, and really just how Cooper centered, even though I don't like thinking about the return as Cooper's story, it's undeniably Cooper centered. And so, you know, why is Laura spending so much time dreaming about various articulations of Cooper is a good question.
So, and I just realized now how long I've been keeping you here. And
Yeah,
first, let me say
that's
thank
my fault. Yeah.
you. Cooper is a sort of a subconscious creation
Yeah, I
of
think so.
Laura, like as Bob is.
Yeah, one of the things I forget where I came across this, but I thought, and it's not my idea.
Mhm.
It's like she dreams good Cooper as like a father figure that actually cares about her, as opposed to her father. And yet he's corrupted in the same way, something along those lines.
Yeah.
And in that way, his journey to try to wake up could be a reflection of her journey trying to wake up.
Mm.
And that I don't know how satisfying that is as an answer to the question of why the return is so Cooper centered, but like maybe that could be one answer that what Cooper is trying to face about himself is connected to her narratively, but also like a metaphor for her own awakening that she keeps putting off and keeps denying
Yeah.
because it's too hard to face.
Yeah. It's hard to say that that's not the case, but
Yeah, but it's also hard to say that it is the case.
but you can
you know.
also say for so many different reasons,
Hmm.
other angles that are like just as plausible.
Totally. Yeah, I'm
You
not committed to this by like as anything definitive or even
can I
necessarily
steal
plausible.
3 more minutes or no?
Sure. Yeah.
20 seconds to answer. I'm going to throw random questions.
Okay.
All right. Just a little speed round.
Yeah.
Uh, let's see. Well, why is Candy like that?
There's something about Candy I feel like Candy is plugged into like one of the more spiritually enlightened uh people in the return, and she appreciates things in a way that I don't think other characters appreciate. In some way, Candy is like a model for all of us.
Hmm, interesting. The security guard in like part 2 or whatever. He's
Yeah,
guarding the room with the glass box.
Yeah, yeah.
Any idea where he goes? Like, was he there? Did he go somewhere? Was there just a jump in time, or any thoughts at all about him?
I hadn't had any thoughts. I came across something today, actually, in
Oh,
my deep dive, which is that when Mr. C knocks out the guard at when he goes
yeah,
picks up Daria and yeah, and he's like, get something better at the door. That's the guard. Like he took out the guard at in New York. And so those two things are reflections of each other.
yeah.
I
Good. That's
like
good. I
that
never
sounds
heard
good
that
to me.
before. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good one.
Yeah.
Um, what is the Red Room?
It's it's clearly something internal. I don't have a great theory about the Red Room, but it's clearly something internal where certain unconscious parts of you are doing battle against each other and deciding how it is that you're going to either fuck up your life or take a step towards, I don't know, figuring your shit out.
Um,
Not a very good answer, but
no,
the speed round.
speed round. You only had 20 seconds. And then, knowing knowing the little that you know about me and my interest in like this type of show, do you have anything you could recommend, like film wise, TV wise, book wise, just anything? And because I know you've talked about a lot of different films on your podcast as well. Anything popping into mind that you think I might like?
Have you seen Stalker?
Yeah, I've
Like
seen
I
everything from him. Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
So you're a Tarkovsky guy, so that's
Fair.
and how about Borges? Have you read Borges stories? I think there's a lot of Borges connections with David Lynch.
I think one or two, and it's your fault because I listened to something you guys were talking about.
Yeah, I would recommend that. You seem pretty like you're kind of a cinephile yourself, but TV wise, did you watch Dark? The first two seasons of
No,
Dark are
never heard of it.
pretty. That's another thing. I don't know if it, again, because I was deep dives with my daughter, so
Oh,
I'm
cool.
kind of influenced by that. But uh, that's really good. Um, Film wise, one of the movies that we did, which I'm sure you've probably seen, is Persona, but very Lynch
Amazing.
influenced and great. Yeah. Yeah, it doesn't sound like I am going to be able to tell you that much, but Borges, I would recommend reading more. Borges, oh, and Murakami, actually. Are you a Murakami guy?
Just I read one short story and then the Wind Up Bird
The
Chronicle.
yeah, Wind Up Bird
Yeah.
Chronicle, yeah. Dance, Wild Sheep Chase, Kafka at the Shore.
Yeah.
Actually, very much like I don't know of any author that gives you the same feeling as you're reading it, where
Yeah.
you don't know what's real and what's not, and you're in this state where you almost feel bad about asking the question, and like you feel like you're missing the point if you're even trying to
Mm.
ask that question. It has that kind of surreality and the kind of comedy and also mystery that so yeah, that's my probably number one
Awesome.
recommendation. Yeah.
Awesome. And then I guess my last question, I have a million, but my last question is did you was this fun at all? Like, did you enjoy?
This?
Did this go well?
Yeah. Well, I can't say whether it went well, but I can say for certain that I enjoyed it a lot. It's so
Yeah.
much fun to talk about this. So thank you very much
Great.
for
Yeah,
having me
I
on.
appreciate it too. It was I was really looking forward to it. I kind of like took a chance just reaching out to you.
Yeah.
And, I wish I was a little more organized, but I don't regret that at all because I felt like we had a just it was just a fun conversation. And
I really enjoyed it.
yeah, and I hope we'll keep in touch and possibly uh I don't know if once in a while I'll do like those group things, but I'll reach out to you just in case you have some free time.
Sure.
But it sounds like
Yeah. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
always up. I will set aside time for this anytime. Thank
Cool.
you so much.
My
I feel honored.
Same here. And there's that word again.
Yeah.
My final request is, not for now, but if your daughter has any like recommendations that she could offer as far as like shows or movies or things that might be fun or possibly even beneficial to somebody who's about to turn 14 and is going through all the things that a 14-year-old girl might, and it's not Twin Peaks, anything else, I'd be really happy to take those recommendations too.
All right. Well, I'll ask her.
Yeah. All right. And wish her well from me. And I appreciate it. We'll keep in touch.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. All right. It's been a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
See ya.